A very good afternoon to all the learners. Today, in this session, we are going to have a brief discussion on conservation of biodiversity. What are global common efforts? That's what we are going to discuss today. We know about the basic concept of ecosystem, ecology, it's different kind of ecosystem from the lens of sustainability, why we need to uh, understand all these basic terms about that and how to protect the environment, all these one of the major component of the sustainable pillars, that's natural environment. We have a brief introduction about that in the last session. So today we are going to look into uh, that biodiversity. We are going to look into it in a specialized way. When we are talking about the structure and component of ecosystem, we talk about biotic component in different form, right? So today we will be focusing on this biodiversity. So before directly looking into what are the global common efforts, now we are going to let us have a quick look into what is biodiversity, means fundamental concept behind biodiversity, right? And if you look into the definition given by different authors, different academics in different forum and fora, you must find out that there are a number of definition and that talks about diversity, its concept and different level of biodiversity. But if you look as a student of sustainability science, how we have to understand biodiversity is in a simple logic. It is diversity of biological components, right? If we are looking from ecosystem structure point of view, right? So as per the definition of biodiversity that was given on the Convention of Biological Diversity and its Article 2, it is defined as biological diversity as the variability among living organisms from all sources. Including earlier, whatever we were talking about the different ecosystem, that terrestrial, marine, and other aquatic ecosystem, right? And the other aquatic ecosystem. What different form of ecosystem we studied in that. So that includes different level, and that's include species, between species and between ecosystem. So it can be looked into. One is very basic concept is biodiversity is variety and variability of living organisms available in the planet Earth, right? Then as we know, when we study about ecosystem concept, we know when we have different ecosystem, their habitat is different. Of course, there will be variety and variability in all those living components, living organisms. So it can be looked. All these biodiversity can be looked into three different levels. That is genetic diversity, and species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. Then what is genetic diversity? When you look into that simple example to understand genetic diversity is a diversity in a particular species, right? For example, here you look into this plant, these flowers. Here you will find out different colors, right? And this is called genetic diversity. In the same flowers, for example, in roses, in this in front of you, in these flowers, you have different colors. That different colors of different example of your flowers, that's diversity, genetic diversity. So is in cows and the buffalo. In cows also you have seen that if you are from rural area, even from urban area also, we know that different variety of cows, right? Even we talk about the Jersey cows and our that lean rhesus cows, then these are the different variety. This is called genetic diversity, right? Then coming to the species diversity, when you talk about the species diversity is about when you talk about the cattle community, that animal community, we have a number of animals like lion, tiger, elephant. In the terms of domestic animals, we have different pets like a dog, and then cat, and so on. And we have buffalo, and then we have cows, and these are called that species diversity. So if you look into the plant diversity also here, you will find out trees, different herb and stuff. These are called as species diversity, right? In the same way, when you talk about ecosystem diversity, when we studied about the concept of ecosystem, we know that different ecosystem. Sure, the diversity in different ecosystem is called ecosystem diversity, right? When when trees dominated in ecosystem, we call it forest ecosystem, and in the forest ecosystem also you will find out if pine forest is dominated in that forest, you will find that pine forest, oak forest, right? And the same way, grassland, if the ecosystem is dominated by the grasses, that calls grassland ecosystem. And in water also, in inland waters and aquatic, and pond, lake water, then river ecosystem, and so on, right? So and then the same way, when we are talking about agriculture, also agriculture is also ecosystem, right? So these are these different, diversity of the different ecosystem calls ecosystem diversity. This characteristic of different that ecosystem diversity can be looked into three perspectives. One is alpha diversity, second is beta diversity, and third is gamma diversity. When we talk about alpha diversity, it indicates diversity within the community or ecosystem, and it refers to the diversity of organisms sharing the same community or habitat. For example, a combination of species richness and evenness. Equitable or equitability is used to represent alpha diversity, right? So when it comes to beta diversity, it talks about diversity between communities or ecosystem. So species, when we talk about the species, it frequently changes when habitat communities ends. You just look into mountain ecosystem from foothill to if you go to higher altitude, there is change in community, right? Then gamma diversity, on the other hand, refers to diversity habitats over the total landscape or geographical area, right? And if you look into the landscape, agricultural, then foothill, then aquatic, so that diversity is called that gamma diversity, that diversity of living organism in that landscape, right? So you will see some from these three photos, you will be able to conceptualize yourself the meaning of alpha diversity, beta diversity, and gamma diversity, right? Then when it comes into then the next is we have to, when we're talking about the biodiversity, this biodiversity is not met or evolved in one day. It is not. So it is a long process, we know that. So if you look into the history of evolution of biodiversity, so far we know that this first the formation of the planet Earth took place. That was around 4.5 billion years ago, when a part of the sun separated from it. So first living organism that was appear was in the ocean, and it was around 3.5 to 4 billion years ago. In that time, the first living organism was were like bacteria, prokaryotes, right? Which, when we talk about prokaryotes, these living organisms, these bacteria do not have cell organelles or nucleus, and they entirely feed on that organic compound dissolved in the water, right? Then second stage is this, the evolution started is that the next evolution is from prokaryote to eukaryotic organism, which was formed around 1.8 billion years ago. Then about 1.1 billion years ago, then simple asexual reproductive strategies were replaced with a more complicated process. We call it as a sexual reproduction, was entirely based on DNA repairing mechanism. Okay. Then again, in the process of evolution, then around 600 million years ago, the first metazoan, and before that it was simple cellular organism. Now multicellular algae were recorded. That was followed by the invertebrate metazoan. Then in the process, when in the process of evolution, then speciation, person speciation happened. Then it created new species from the existing species that leads into the evolution of first primitive fish and vertebrates. About 500 billion years ago. Then until 500 million years ago, the forms of life was existed only in water, because in that time there was no silt, ozone. We can say ozone UV radiation silt was not there in the outer atmosphere. That was that was the reason why the evolution of life was started in water. And water, it was it's still the UV radiation. Then in the atmosphere, then ozone formation was there. Then after absorb that ozone formation, that ozone absorb high energy content of ultraviolet radiation. This is the sudden change in evolution of life, and from after that formation of ozone, then started the life coming towards the land, right? That was about 440 million years ago. Then the first plant, you find the first plant followed by invertebrate and vertebrate. They started colonizers in the land. That's first plant means plants in the land. So in that, there is another, in the same time, there is another that physical geological phenomenon. As we know, the continent, from a single continent, it was divided into, what our assumption is, divided into 7 continents or so. So in that time, when it was done, in that time, then we can say that we cannot say that all the living beings, they are able to survive in the plant, that in the land. That was not so, right? So then they are evolved in the land masses, and the others are evolved in ocean, in water body. This is how it was. Then again, in the process about 200 million years ago, as I told you, that plate tectonics that is happened. When plate tectonics happened, that where the continent was divided into single Pangea is break up into different continents, and because of that, different geographical different landform was happen, and because of that, diversity in landform was also happen. When diversity in landform happen, because of different structure, of course there is different geographical barriers was there, and at different level the environment condition and soil condition was happen. Because of that, the evolution of a species started in depending upon the area they live. So in around 400 million years, there was that periodic massive losses of diversity known as mass extinction events was there. During the last 7,000 years, humans have drastically modified, and because of this, first it was happened during that, before human interference or intervention was there, it was happened. Mass extinction, all this happened. Massive extinction was happened because of the natural cycle, natural processes, right? After human adapted to our system, and we overtake the natural processes, then depleting of species was beyond the natural rate. That was happening today. The result we are the consequences what we have done in the last several thousands, the consequence we are getting now, right? So this is so far in the process. Is another point is that we know that there are a number of species has been identified and described, about 1.7 billion, and we estimated that about 14 billion species must be there, right? So percentage of species we identified is only few of the probable and estimated total species. So the point is we are need to explore. In the same time, what happened in the process of exploration, it was, we can say that we are in the beginning of identification of a species. In that time, then extinction rate is so much high. If you look into these in a publication in Science by the group of authors in 2019, this figure and that publication, they have summarized how much that we have met extinct or identify, even only the identify species. This is the status, right? So you will find out here that about 25% of species are threatened with extinction, right? This is the figure, and this, here, how to estimate the rates of extinction, from here you will be able to find out that, for example, I'm taking only from this table, I'm explaining only one component, right? The others you will be able to understand when after you download it, and you will be able to, easily understand this table. One is in 1 million species between 1975 to 2000. In this table, it figure only when, only 25 years from 1975 to 2000, when they use a method of that that species area estimation method. They found that percentage of global loss per decade is 4%, right? So it is, the trend is exponentially increasing. See, when they studied for 25 years. So this is a very alarming situation, we know that. So the others are example of how different authors calculated and the rate of global loss per decade, even before we are able to explore most of the species which we are estimated that may exist in the biosphere in the Earth. Then I will look into, one is what we are able to understand so far in today's session is, first we have a quick look into the concept of biodiversity, different levels, and now we know that biodiversity is losing every day, and it's quite alarming if you look into the rate of loss of biodiversity due to human intervention, right? Then how biodiversity is distributed across the world. And it was, when we are technically looking into the way the biodiversity is distributed. And, we know that in the process evolution of species, and with that of that geological phenomenon of that plate tectonic movement of plate tectonics, and there was diversity in geographical that landform, that directly related, that is directly related to the diversity in species. So depending on the characteristic available across the world, then we can look at that distribution of biodiversity in two major characteristics. One is biodiversity hotspots. The second is mega diversity countries, right? Then what is biodiversity hotspot? Biodiversity hotspots is an area, large area. If we do not look into details on here, what is hotspot biodiversity? An area where diversity of species high, plus you will find out some specific species which are endemic to that area. Means the species is not available in other part of the world other than that area. So if that area is called hotspot, that's India have few hotspots, right? 3-4 hotspots. So if you look into how this concept of biodiversity hotspot was evolved, then it was started in 1988. British ecologist Norman Mayers published a seminal paper identifying 10 tropical forest hotspots, and he characterized on this 10 hotspot by exceptional levels of plant endemism in one side, in the other side, serious level of habitat loss, right? So hotspot is a place, diversity is also very high, endemism, plant endemism is also there. In the same time, there is serious levels of habitat loss. This is the basic concept of biodiversity hotspot, right? Then Then Mayer's concept was adopted by Conservation International. And in 1989 and in 1996, the organization made a decision to undertake a reassessment of the hotspot concept, and it includes an examination of whether key areas had been overlooked or not. So 3 years later, an extensive global review was undertaken, which introduced quantitative threshold for the designation of biodiversity hotspot and resulted in the designation of 25 hotspots. Right, that was 1996. So in 2005, then additional analysis brought the total number of biodiversity hotspots from 25 to 34, based on the work of different specialists across the world. So in 2011, then 35 hotspots was introduced. Was listed that part of East Australia that was identified as a 35, and followed by in February 2016, then 36 hotspots, that is the North American coastal plain, was recognized. That is a 36 hotspots. This is about that. Then, as I mentioned, and we know from the concept of hotspot, when they identify a place in hotspots of biodiversity, two basic strict criteria is there. One is, it must have at least 1,500 vascular plants is endemic, which is to say that it must have a high percentage of plant life found nowhere else on the planet. So in other words, if it is, if it is lost in that place, there it will not be replaced by any of the other species. That is what I'm saying. So it must have 30% or less of its original natural vegetation. In other words, it must be threatened, right? That is the exact technicality of what we understand as a hotspot. So around the world, I told you the latest one is as per 2000. That is as per 2016. And latest, we have 36 areas qualify as a hotspot that represent about 2.4% of Earth's land surface. And these 22.5%, they support more than half of the world plant species are endemic, and 43% of bird, mammal, reptiles, and amphibian species as endemic. But only 2.4% of Earth's land surface, they represent half of the world plant species, right? So these are the list of hotspots 1988 onwards. I will not go in detail, as I told you that the latest one is this American coastal plain. So in this table, latest one American coastal land might not be there. Though in this latest one is Southwest Australia. After that, you can add that 26 one, right? Then another place which we identify the way of pattern of biodiversity that exists, biodiversity that spread across the world is mega diverse countries. And mega diverse countries are those that house the largest niches of biodiversity, including a large number of endemic species. Here, it becomes, and endemism also they are taking here. This concept was, if we look into how concept was introduced, proposed by Russell Mittermeier, and is now used to raise awareness to the protection of natural biodiversity, and particularly in the countries where this is more abundant and threatened. So in accordance with the World Conservation Monitoring Center, for a country to consider megadiversity, must have at least 5,000 endemic plants and have marine ecosystem within its borders, right? So this is the two important criteria to identify or to list a country as megadiverse country. Then the World Conservation Monitoring Center of the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, identifies 17 megadiverse countries across the world. They are Australia, Brazil, China, Colombia, Ecuador, United States, Philippines, India, Indonesia, Madagascar, Malaysia, Mexico, Papua New Guinea, Peru, Democratic Republic of Congo, South Africa, and Venezuela. In fact, in 2002, that like-minded countries, they in 17 megadiversity countries, as described in this UNEP program, along with Bolivia, Costa Rica, Kenya, they consulted and they are trying to work more in conservation of biodiversity. Like, so now from 17 up to 2002 and in 2016 it has become 20 countries, right? We know about uses and importance of biodiversity, goods or provisioning services, cultural services, then ecological services like supporting, regulating services that we talked yesterday, last session. Then let us have look into how biodiversity loss was happen. One is, because of habitat loss. Now, when there is habitat is loss, automatically it will not be able to survive in that place. Those species who survive in that pond ecosystem or in an aquatic ecosystem in a lake or zill. Now, if the lake is dried or because of human interference, and then if the lake is not exist, all the species will not exist in that environment, right? So this is how habitat loss. I'm giving a simple example. The invasive species, the species which are easily to grow anywhere, that if it comes and it will overtake the natural species over there, and it will ruin the life cycle of different species. Like, for example, Lantana camera, then Prosopis, Zuliforia, that was more common in India, especially, in Delhi, and because of this Prosopis zuliforia, a number of endemic species and native species was lost locally. So when it comes, then extinction become at local level, then if level is increases, at last it has become extinction from the surface of the earth. Then the third is, pollution. When this is same with invasive, when you talk about the species, it was used the term invasive species. In this, it is, pollution is that particular component which is not liked by a particular species, if it is poison to them, right? Like to us also. So when it is poison to them, they automatically will die. And the species, another species which are existed there, which were very, they are able to survive in that pollutant, they will overtake, that will dominate that environment. So in that way, for example, how eutrophication changed in the process. When you look from ecological point of view, when eutrophication happened because of pollution, the pond ecosystem at last that will become as swampy area, right? Then it will grow. Then from swampy area to it will become a forest area or grassland area. Right? Then the population growth. We know that human interference, because of the growth in human population, we are giving so much pressure to the different ecosystem. Then overconsumption, which is directly related to population growth. When the resource production, natural production, and this much only 50 kg, and we are demanding more than that, that is because then you will then take up all the available, or you will try to have another new species. That's why we are talking about that genetically modified organism, plant species, so that whatever that gap in that production, natural production, that we think that will be taken care by those species, right? That is genetically modified organism. After introduction of that, when you introduce GMO, genetically modified organism or plant, then that will dominate it again. Then that will create a problem to the natural species. For example, what has happened in most of the ecosystem in India, most of our land races, like rice land races, rice varieties are no more, right? Because it is, when we introduce a number of GMO there, and hybrid varieties over there, right? So these are some of the examples how biodiversity is being lost and the process. So this is a collection from some of the publication by IPBS in 2019. I will explain about IPBS in the later stage of this session. No. If you look, our understanding is that after post-industrialization, what has happened more importantly is in after 1970s, whatever the extinction rate, degradation rate is increasing by very high rate. So this IPBS report, they study from 1970s. When they study from 1970, have looked into gross domestic product here, from 1970, GDP is increasing the very high rate. So in the same way, domestic material consumption, you look here, domestic material consumption of different country, developed country, developing country, least developed country. Now here, developed country, what has happened? Their domestic material consumption rate is decreased because they are extracting from the other country, right? So this has related that with that of globalization. So you will see here, and there's world average also. If you look into world average, it is increasing, right? So extraction of living biomass, domestic consumption, exports. See, most of except developed country, right? Other than developing countries, least developed country, world average is increasing the very first rate. And the reason why developed countries are having, I told you, because they are trying to take more from the developing or underdeveloped country. That is, they are trying not trying, they are exactly getting benefit from other country. So in some way, but in the same way, what we can look is the positive part is if you look into the protection of key biodiversity areas, that is the one of the common global efforts for conservation of biodiversity. In developed country, they are highly rich country, they have enough money. For them, it is increasing, right? And after 2010, there was stabilized over there, right? So if you look into that in the global average, now it can be looked that we are increasing, awareness is increasing, right? So air pollution, you look here, that is increasing even, right? See, in 1970s, air pollution, 70s, the air pollution was very high in developed country. But if you look into that they realized the thing, it was decreasing, right? But if you look into the overall scenario, right, after 1970s, after 1980s, as we know that there are global common efforts was happening, we are quite aware about the consequences of development activities done by our arts. So the air pollution rate is up to some extent, we are able to manage that. So simple example is air pollution in Delhi. What used to be before CNG was introduced, till 1990s led, the air pollution in Delhi, even when I came in Delhi in around 2000, it was very difficult, to compare with whatever we are having today. In that time, if you are traveled about 20 to 25 kilometers, then your white cloth will become dark, right? So this is about fertilizer use. Fertilizer use is increasing. That means, with the increase of fertilizers, and there's non-point source of pollution that has important role in eutrophication, that has direct impact to the degradation of aquatic ecosystem, biodiversity, aquatic biodiversity, right? And here, this global declines in nature, how it is declined. My point, why I'm bringing over here all these in this table, which is published by different authorities, as a student of sustainability science, how we can understand, how we have to understand is the indirect. Most of the time we talk about the direct drivers, and we need to understand from holistic way what are the indirect drivers, how it is directly related to direct drivers, what are its consequences, and how it is declining. This is exactly showing in this publication, Global Declines in Nature by Dice et al. In this figure, we will find out the indirect that drivers, demographic and the sociocultural, economic and technological, institution governance, conflicts, and epidemics. Today we are having epidemics, issues of global pandemic and all these things. These are the indirect drivers. That has, on the other hand, that has impact to the direct drivers like terrestrial, freshwater, direct land use change, direct exploitation, climate change, pollution, invasive alien species. Others what we have talked few seconds back, that has direct impact to the terrestrial, freshwater, marine, different ecosystem, right? And if you look into the figure, some of the examples of declines in nature is, natural ecosystem overall, the ecosystem extended condition have declined by 47% on average relative to their earliest estimate stats, right? Then species extinction, here also in this publication also reflected approximately 25% of species are already threatened with extinction, right? So in the same way, ecological communities declined by 24%, 23%, and 82% of that biomass species abundance. And on the other hand, indigenous peoples, local communities, they play an important role. And in that also 72% of indicators developed by all these indigenous people and local communities, it shows that ongoing deterioration of elements of nature, which are very important plant to them, is 72% of the species. It's important, but in the same time we are declining in very first way, right? If you look into the IUCN list, you will find out the different category: extinct, already extinct, extinct in the wild, but you are dominant. We are domesticated plant. We are planting, cropping crops and others. Then threatened categories that critically endangered, vulnerability. This term most of us know that the basics are available in study material. Then near threatened, least concern, data deficient, not evaluated, right? These are the categories. These categories have been prioritizing the conservation effort, right? So these are definition. When we say extinct, in that it is totally extinct from the surface of the earth, from the earth and our planet. Then when we see extinct in the wild, some of the species you will get in either in botanical garden, zoological garden, or many ecosystem. When you talk about critically endangered, it is when it's facing an extremely high risk of extinction in the wild in the immediate future, right? When you talk about a species as endangered category, in fact, it is not critically endangered, but is facing an extremely high risk of extinction in the wild in the near future. This is the definition of the different category of IUCN, right? So if you look into that, this publication by IPBC gives a figure on how different categories and how much percentage estimate of percentage of threatened species exists in the planet Earth. This is how you will see, you will be able to understand easily, right? This is a simple, a limited study. Many more must be beyond this. Data may be very alarming than this, right? So they have studied different critically endangered different species, their level of global extinction risks, like bony fishes, gastrotop, birds, dragonfly. How many dragonfly, how many birds are in different categories? This is explained here, right? And if you look into extinction since 1,500, you'll find here extinction rate is in cumulative species extinction rate is certainly increased after 1900, right? And the same way, declining species survival means survival rate is declining, right? This IPBS, it is an extract from IPBS report. So the point is that when you talk about biodiversity loss, we sometimes have a gap of understanding. Okay, nature is losing, what we can do, but we have to understand its relation with our humanity, that a human survival, not only the survival of other species. When some species is extinct, that have direct or indirect impact to the whole entire ecosystem, especially to human society. So we know that we have 7 sustainable development goals, and we are trying to achieve that 7 sustainable development goals by 2030. But in the same time, we know that biodiversity loss is happening. So when we are not able to control the biodiversity loss, how it is impacting to other achieving sustainable development goals, just have a quick look into that. For example, when you talk about goal number 1, no poverty, right? When we talk about no poverty, then what happened when there is no biodiversity? The targets of no poverty is eradicate extreme poverty, halve the proportion of people in the poverty, ensure that all have equal right to economic resources, build the resilience of the poor. See, in this simple goal number 1, simple example is that eradicate extreme poverty means, biodiversity plays an important role in feeding the people, right? So if your that biodiversity is losing, and nutritious food is losing, it will be very difficult to achieve goal number 1 and goal number 2. In the same way, when you talk about good health and well-being, it is that related to the what we are talking about ecosystem function, then ecosystem provision services given by the ecosystem. When you may have good infrastructure, health infrastructure, but if you do not have a good natural environment, it will be very difficult to have a good health and well-being. That is a well-known fact, And then it's about clean water and sanitation. We know that clean water is given. It's one of given by the biodiversity. That it is a services of ecosystem services, as ecosystem service provide us clean water, clean air. In the same way, others goals are also related, directly or indirectly related to biodiversity loss. Right. So what we have to do? We need to conserve the biodiversity, right? Need to conserve the biodiversity. Different process has to follow. Those different process are, that in situ, ex situ conservation strategy. What are the different the international efforts, and what is status of biodiversity conservation in India? And we are following different approaches, and some of them are successfully implemented, and we are going very well in terms of conserving the biodiversity, in terms of our action taken. But in the same time, we are facing a number of challenges meeting the global goals of biodiversity conservation. And if you look into the basic biodiversity conservation, one is in situ, another ex situ. When we talk about in situ, the conservation effort is in that wild area. Then that's why we have different protected area network, like biosphere reserve, national park, sacred groves, sacred lake. And in Biosphere Reserve also, we have marine biodiversity reserve, terrestrial biodiversity reserve. When we talk about ex situ conservation, it's also like sacred plants. We have different sacred plants, because of our value, religious and that traditional value, that we worship them, we preserve them. Then home gardens, number of varieties of plants. Then we are putting them in our gardens. This is a way of how we are consuming. If you look into different variety of beans that was available for remote areas, like tribal belt, even in the Himalayan that hill ranges, and then even Northeast India. And then if you look into the tribal belt of Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, and Odisha, Koraput region of Odisha, and so on, and that they have conserved a number of that endemic plant species and so on. In the same way, we have seed bank, field gene bank, cryopreservation, then botanical gardens, arboretum, zoological garden, aquarium. So these are some of the biodiversity conservation approaches we follow for the conservation of biodiversity. And we know that since 1970s, we have a number of biodiversity-related convention, and in the peak we started first, that was especially the conservation of biodiversity was special focus was started since 1990s. We have Convention of Biological Diversity, we have Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna, Convention on Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals, and the International Treaty on Plant Genetics for Food and Agriculture. We have Convention on Wetland, we call as Ramsar Convention, that was happened 1979. Then World Heritage Convention, it must be 79, 77. I'm not sure. We can relook into that. World Heritage Convention. These are some of the international effort for conservation of biodiversity, like International Plant Protection Convention, the International Whaling Commission. Then some of the latest important convention protocol is Nagoya Protocol on Access and Benefit Sharing. And the beginning of conservation efforts, our objective was conservation only, right? At any cost, we have to conserve the biodiversity. But when after the starting of, especially from the beginning of this century, conservation can be. We realize that conservation cannot be successful if we do not taken care of, we do not involve the local community. So that's why the access and the benefit sharing, that concept come, and that was a major focus on Nagoya Protocol, and then that Katagana Protocol, that major focus was on biosafety, and these are some of the protocols that related to conservation of biodiversity. In the same way, every year, every year we have International Day of Biological Diversity, and to have a more focus on conservation of biodiversity, United Nations declare 2011 to 2020, last decade, is United Nations Decade on Biodiversity, and 2010 was declared as International Year of Biodiversity, right? So every year, International Day for Biological Diversity, which we observe, or we can say we can celebrate on 22nd May, then it has different themes from year to year. If you look into latest one, that was in 2020, and the major theme was on our solution are in nature, right? So in the same way, it was in 2002, it was dedicated to forest biodiversity, then 2014, island biodiversity. So we celebrate this day, 22nd May, is International Day of Biological Diversity. Each year, we identify themes, different themes, right? Then this is about what I was talking about, IPBAs, which today's session I actually take some of the latest publication report that published by these IPBAs. What is IPBAs? IPBAs is the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform Biodiversity Ecosystem Services. It is an independent intergovernmental body established by different states to strengthen the science policy interface for biodiversity and ecosystem service for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity and long-term human well-being and sustainable development. In fact, it was established in the year 2012 by 94 states, means government. It is not an UN body, but no, in 2013, and it is that UNEP Governing Council authorized, and they provide that UNEP provide that secretary service to IPBAs, right? Then in the latest development, we talk about IUCN Red List. Now we know that the conservation of biodiversity cannot be fulfilled unless if you do not look at conservation effort in the ecosystem or broader context. So IUCN that major objective of IUCN is to protect wherever possible. So IUCN introduced a number of they identify a number of areas, that protected areas, and what are then protected areas, and they have classified those protected areas, and then they are the objective of these protected areas is that should have a clearly defined geographical space that should be recognized, dedicated, and managed through legal or other effective means, and to achieve the long-term conservation of nature with associated ecosystem services and cultural values, right? You just try to understand here in this definition, which is defined by IUCN about protected area. Important is long-term conservation of nature with associated ecosystem services and cultural values. That is the main objective, right? If you look into the categories that is identified by World Conservation on protected areas, that is six management categories. One is strict nature reserve. Then in the category one, they have two subcategory. One is strict nature reserve, then wilderness area, and subcategory two. In the same way, we talk about national park. The second category, third category, natural monument or features, and fourth category, habitat species management area. Fifth category talks about protected area or landscape. Sixth category, protected area with sustainable use of natural resources. Means human interference means we have to harvest in sustainable way, right? And how, as of now, that IUCN listed green list of protected and conserved areas. And they are currently in latest in 2020, we have 258,600 designated protected areas recorded under this world protected area. Taken. Most areas are on land. This is the figure of in percentage. About 15% of the land surfaces are under world data on protected areas. That as per the data provided by IUCN Green List, 15% of the earth land surface is under the list of protected and conserved areas. Then, as we have already talked about emergence of global emergence of biodiversity conservation, convention of biodiversity, and so on. Now let us have a quick look into biodiversity conservation in our very own country, India. What are the different biodiversity conservation program in India? About the national park, sanctuaries, gene banks. What are our institutional framework, and so on. So if you look into the important conservation sites in India, we have. If you look at the reserve inside, we have Tiger Reserve, Elephant Reserve, Biosphere Reserve, Ramsar Wetland Site, Natural World Heritage Site, Cultural World Heritage Site, Mixed World Heritage Site, important coastal and marine biodiversity areas, important bird areas, and then potential important bird areas, key biodiversity area, biodiversity heritage site. These are the categories under reserve sites, under India's important conservation sites. Right. If you look into that, this is a figure exact how in 2000 we used to have 146,665 square kilometer only. Right. In 2019 we have 165,012. Means it is increasing. Right. This how the coverage of protected areas and different categories are increasing. See here, number of wildlife sanctuary, it was only 485 in 2000. Today in 2019 and latest figure, it is about 500. It is 553. So in that way, conservation effort is increasing. So here in this figure also, protected areas is how much national parks cover about 1.23 percent that land area, 1.23% of our countries. Wildlife sanctuaries about 3.64. In the same way, 0.12 conservation reserve, and total protected areas 5.02% of our total geographical land of India. Right. So these are the list of Ramsar Wetland site. So this is what that's all for today. You see today what we have learned. We learned today is about the basic concept of that biodiversity. Then what are the global common efforts for conservation of biodiversity? And then what the Indian scenario. What of our common effort of biodiversity, right? And many more, from these references you can get more on that. I suggest you to read all these reference, and if required, I will also send some of the selected reference from here. So with this, I would like to open the session for discussion, and give me some time.
Hello, sir.
Yes, yes. Please give me a minute. Give me.
Yes, sir.
Let me do. Okay. All I request is to show your video, please. Then so that I can give me a minute. So all are requested to come in the video. There's some issues over here. Let me check. All are requested come in the video. The video mode. Sleep holding. Please come in the video. Please. Please show your video. Sir, complete Krishna, Mansi, Rutu, Kailas, Sir, Dev Singh, who is
So,
missing?
so it's me.
Oh, the Mansi is okay.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, my phone, laptop had some issue, camera issue, so I logged in from the phone.
Okay. Okay. So I'm taking Weber showing. Okay, now we can have a brief discussion. If you have anything to share, please.
Yes, sir. What type of questions can come in exam for biodiversity? Could you
That is
explain?
you read all. You read all. You read all.
What, sir?
You read whatever written, whatever we did. I mean, presented today.
Yeah, but then question as in which what sort of question will come? Like will it come on only biodiversity or how to save it? Like could you give an example or something?
Conceptual, analytical. I cannot give analytical type of question, conceptual type of question. Okay,
Oh,
this type of question will come. Right. Otherwise, we can wind up the session.
No. Hi, Dr. Khuman.
Please.
Good afternoon. This
Yeah.
is
Yes. Please.
Bhupesh Singh. I could not attend few sessions because
Yeah.
I'm in having parallelly meeting in my organization. Thank you so
Okay.
much. In fact, I would also like to comment to Faz's question. These kind of courses. We should not do with an aim to pass the exam. I mean, it is basically to inculcate interest and analyze and apply your brain so that
Mm,
you can motivate people to support the SDG 17 STG. For an
mm.
example, like I have started applying. See how I can save energy. And Dr. Khuman, I mean, today's session, luckily I attended. It was so good and very close to my heart. I mean,
You
I
can
will
show
give you
your
an
video
example.
when you speak. Please show your video when you speak.
Yeah. So, in fact, I'll give you an example of biodiversity, which I have taken up as an initiative to promote. I work with Henkel and I'm responsible for CSR initiative. So, I have plant in Pune district. And this area is rain deficient area. I mean, some part of Pune, that downed area. So, and farmers are basically doing sugar cane farming. that is highly water intensive crop, and it requires the usage of lot of fertilizer. So what I have done, I mean, I have allocated 50 lakhs from my organization. If I'll ask farmer to stop farming, they'll not unless we provide them an alternate. So what I have
Yes.
done, see, this place is very close to two biggest market of India. So I'm working with some agriculture scientists to switch them to less water dependent crop like pomegranate, fig, and moringa. These are, we also talked about today's health and well-being. Health and well-being is not, are we eating healthy food? Not at all. See, the total requirement of milk for India is 64 crore liters, and production is only 14 crore liters. God
Yeah.
knows what we are drinking every day in the morning, because nobody is ready to produce milk. I am helpless. I love to spend time with cows, but unfortunately I am living in Mumbai. I cannot pursue that hobby, but if I get an opportunity, I will definitely. So what I have done, Dr. Khuman, I will share my experience. I am encouraging farmers to switch to integrated farming. I, from my organization, have selected 10 poor farmers, those who have arable land of not more than 1.5 acres. Will be developing 6,000 acre ka water pond so that they can harvest the water. We'll be giving them two cows. Be giving them two goat. We'll be setting up the drip irrigation so that they use less, and we 100 fruit plants which can give them immediate cash. So they'll be using less water. Parallelly, they are switching to more environment friendly farming, less uses of fertilizer. Why I we have chosen to give them cow? Because one cow is sufficient for 1 acre farming. If we switch to
Organic.
if
Cow
we
dung.
tell them to not to use. So
Cow dung.
every year, we will be supporting, rather funding 10 poor farmers so that they switch to this kind of farming. This is my initiative. I mean, we don't have huge CSR fund, but from last 1.5 year, I am working with a lot of renowned people who have done a lot of contribution in this field. I am illiterate in this, so definitely today's session you talked about STG. That is really really important, and I always I'm the one who always support the provision of both penalty and motivation. So if somebody is doing something good, for an example, there are huge arable land. Like for my own, I belong to a place in Chhattisgarh. I own 5 acre land, but that is empty. I'm not doing it anything. But yes, I have decided now, if I'm not doing crop, at least I can plant tree
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
So that way is, like, unless we encourage people, we cannot you talked about like one lakh 44 square kilometer, to we have reached to one lakh 65 thousand square kilometer of protected land with lot of biodiversity. So unless we all work together, especially these are the behavioral traits. I mean, this should be part of primary education system.
Yeah, yeah,
SDG, I mean, unless SDG becomes part of primary education system, I think it will not become part of our behavior.
yeah, yeah, right. That is exactly. That is
Mm.
exactly. I agree with you. I also like the way you are thinking. Uh, that's why even I am thinking of. I mean, after retirement, I will go back to my village and I will start the way you are doing. Cool. Giving
I
money.
will not stay, Dr. Khuman, I will not stay for a single day in Mumbai
Uh,
after my retirement.
uh,
Because post retirement, if I stay in Mumbai, I will have to spend all my earning on my medical expenses.
uh,
If I don't do 8 hour work, I will fall sick. Well-being.
yeah,
As per the WHO definition of health, it is not free from disease.
it is
It
a
is complete physical, mental, and
yeah,
social happiness.
yeah, yeah,
So this God has, I mean, created, and so balanced. Nature is so balanced. If we don't do work, we will not have, we will not have proper sleep.
Yeah, yeah,
So I mean, I want to, remain fit till last breath of my life. I
yeah,
don't have any choice but to do 8-hour work every day, post retirement also.
yeah. That,
So I think Dr. Khuman, with your leadership, I mean, if you have some project, I can also collaborate and we can support as well.
yeah,
As long as I am taking care of CSR, we can collaborate.
yeah,
I don't know tomorrow I'll be taking care of CSR of my organization or not. Until I am taking care, I can definitely support in case we have some good project. We can work together.
yeah. Okay.
Thank
Uh,
you so much. Thank
yeah.
you so much.
Okay.
I'm really, I mean, today's session was indeed very good and very informative. I'm lucky that I didn't miss it. Thank you so much.
Like, others, others also please share. It's sustainability science is co-learning, co-sharing. Others,
If anybody is doing anything good and if you like, financial support, please feel free to contact me. If it is good, I will definitely support.
see, this is the importance that PGTC is going to give. This is the way we have to develop network. This is the way how we have to go towards achieving sustainable development. Right? Any others? No. Okay, then let us wind up the session. Today, unfortunately, It is Delhi is crossing 40, and AC is not working.
Come to Mumbai, doctor. This is, in nature, there is neither reward nor punishment,
Yeah,
only consequences. So we have damaged the environment. So we
yeah,
should be ready to face the consequences.
yeah. Okay, okay.
Thank you. You are
Okay.
welcome to Mumbai. Mumbai weather is excellent.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Coastal area are always.
Yeah. Thank you.